alaikum. So today we are talking about sincerity and intentions. So we know that our actions are rewarded by our intentions, and we should be striving to do everything for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Like you love for the sake of Allah, you do good for the sake of Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, I didn't create jinn and mankind except to worship me. And so it's very clear that our purpose in this dunya is to worship Allah. And when our intentions are misaligned, that is when we will start to do things that will cause harm to us mentally, physically, emotionally. And what do I mean by that? Let's say prayer, right? While your limbs may be performing the act of worship itself, if your heart and your intention is not set in the right place, you are not benefiting from that act. So if you are getting up to pray because people are watching you and you want to appear as a pious or righteous person, you're not doing it because you believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deserves your worship, then essentially it's even worse, because you are now doing something not for the sake of Allah, but for the sake of your own pursuit, your own gain in this dunya. And so think about someone who does a noble cause, like a noble act, right? Like they collect money for a charity, and everyone just talks about how amazing they are because they've done this great thing. It's for leukemia patients and their children, but then they're smuggling the money or they misuse it, and it's not something that has been anyone who donated is aware about, right? Like they don't know how that money is being used. They're being told that it's going to be used for this charity, and then it's not being used for that. And so that act itself, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask them, and he's going to ask them, what did you do, right? Or why did you do this? And these individuals on the day of judgment, they will say, Ya Allah, like for instance, like this, like, oh, I taught these people the Quran for your sake. And Allah's going to say, that's not true. You did it for your own sake, right? Like it's because these people misplaced their intentions. And so then the other thing that we have to think about is, what do we do? How do we work on this, right? Like, how do we work to make sure that our intentions are set in the right place? And so the best thing that you can do from the start, before you commit the act of worship, is to set the intention and tell yourself, this is why I'm doing it. I'm doing it to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm doing it to glorify Allah. And because once you've done it, once you are in the act and you receive praise or admiration, it will be very easy for you to get swayed. So if you wait to set the intention for the act until you're already in it or deep in it, it will result in you having a hard time purifying that intention. And then there are three categories when it comes to your intentions. The first category of those people, like first are the people who set the intention and they're able to maintain it. Even if they struggle, they are able to still maintain that intention. So they start the intention to do the act to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and even if they struggle, they are able to still maintain it. The second category of people are going to be the people who will basically start for the sake of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but then they will struggle, and somewhere along the way they will not be able to stay on the right track, right? Their intentions will no longer be for the sake of Allah. And then the third category of people are the hypocrites. And that's the category of individuals who will say that they're doing something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like we talked about, gathering money for charity, but then that wasn't the intention from the get-go. And the intention is something like Allah is aware of what's in their hearts, but those individuals will go around saying, I'm doing this for the sake of Allah, and it appears to other people that they're doing it for the sake of Allah, but really they're just the hypocrites. The other thing that I was really thinking about as I was reflecting on this is the fact that, you know, we talk about our sincerity and our intentions, but oftentimes, like when we think about sincerity in the acts of worship, you really have to ask yourself, why am I worshiping Allah, right? And when you dig deep, oftentimes what I found even with my clients is that they will say that they do it because they have to. And yes, we should fear the punishment that comes with disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also we should have an understanding of the blessings that Allah has bestowed on us without us having to ask for it, and the signs around us, the power that Allah holds. And if we reflect on who Allah is and who we are standing in front of, right, in Salah, and who we're talking to, if our hearts are connected to Allah, we would feel just lucky to be able to worship Him. So our thoughts would actually, we would perceive things very differently. I believe that if we truly understood what it means to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we would strive to worship Allah. We would run to worship Allah because we would understand the sweetness of standing in front of your maker, your creator, and knowing that He has given you the chance to worship Him, that He has guided you out of all the people. He has guided you and He has moved your heart. And we know that Allah is the one who mends hearts. He's the turner of hearts. He's the one that can set your heart on the straight path. And so the fact that you are able to worship Him, that itself should make us feel grateful. And as I was reflecting on all of this, there was something else that crossed my mind. I was thinking about the fact that oftentimes we hear people say, I'm making this dua, I'm asking for this thing, one specific thing, it's been this many years, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't given it to me. He hasn't answered me. But their intensity of their worship and the way that they turn to Allah is something that they would never do outside of that struggle, outside of wanting that thing. If their circumstances were to change, they would not worship Allah in the same way. And so there are two things that come to my mind when I think about such circumstances. One, at that point, if all that consumes you is what you want from Allah, and you're worshiping Him a lot, and you're praying at night, and waking up for tahajjud, and you're doing your dhikr and adhkar, and you're reciting the Quran, and you're doing istighfar, but nothing is changing in your life, then it's time to look and reflect on your heart and ask yourself, what is the condition of my heart? Because this is when, that's my personal opinion, I believe that when we are fixated on something, that is when we have taken our desire, which may not be a bad thing, it's something that's halal, let's say, right, that you really want, you desire, and it's halal and Allah has made it permissible, and you're making dua for it. But if that is all that is consuming your thoughts and your mind and your goals, and everything just revolves around that, then you have essentially taken that thing and placed it in the center of your life, and now that has become your ilah, your God. And so why would Allah give it to you if that thing is so important to you? If that thing is what's gonna, like, how are you gonna react when you receive it, right? Do you just abandon Allah? Do you stop worshiping Him? The other thing that comes to mind is, what if Allah were to give it to you, and Allah knows that you will no longer worship Him in the same manner, and that you would not turn to Him, and because of that, out of His mercy, He withholds that. and he doesn't give it to you. And so it's either that you have taken whatever it is and turned it into your God and you're worshiping it, or that Allah knows how you would react when you receive it, and so He's withholding that out of mercy. But let's change our thought process, okay? And let's reframe how you see what it is that you're seeking, what it is that you're praying for. Let's say you are seeking to get married. And if marriage is the only thing that's consuming your mind, then you have to understand, okay, I have to become, like, let's say you are seeking to marry a righteous person, someone who's compassionate, someone who follows the command of Allah, someone who's fearful of Allah, and someone who takes his role as a husband seriously, right? He understands the responsibilities that comes with being a husband. Then ask yourself, of course, when we're talking about these traits like having good akhlaq, character, personality, like someone who's compassionate, who controls their anger, who is able to watch how they speak, who's able to have a good opinion of others, who knows their responsibilities, who strives to please Allah, who fears disobeying Allah. That those qualities are associated with someone who's righteous. And so you have to ask yourself, someone like that most likely would be worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because they understand the magnitude of the things that Allah has bestowed upon him, right? So this individual would be worshiping Allah out of love for Allah. And that means that if you love Allah, Allah loves you. He's beloved to Allah. There's a connection. This individual has a link with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then here comes you and you worship Allah, but you don't do it out of love. You worship Allah because you want something from Him. And then you're wondering, why is Allah not giving me this one thing that I'm asking for? And I'm asking for a righteous spouse. Why is Allah not giving it to me? Well, think about it. If He is beloved to Allah, why would Allah give someone who is beloved to Him and who loves Allah to you, who is only turning to Allah to get something from Him? Like, if you put it that way, then it really does push you to take a step back and acknowledge that there is a deeper work that you need to do within yourself, right? Because when someone like that comes into your life, you have to also understand that you need to learn how to love that person for the sake of Allah. So that means giving them their rights. Like, yes, understand your rights, but also know what their rights are. And know that Allah has their back. And also understand that you cannot expect to get something if those qualities are not something that you have yourself. And so you could be praying, you could be fasting, you could be wearing your hijab, you could say that I have the haya, and you could have all these other traits, right? You're on the outside, you could look like the perfect individual who checks all the boxes. But what if it's an internal state that you need to work on? What if you need to change what's within you? And we're not talking about you being a bad person. You could be kind, you could be compassionate, you could be humble, you could be truthful. But what if amongst all these good traits, your intentions are misplaced, misaligned? And what you need to do is reevaluate your intentions and ask yourself, why am I seeking this? Because let's say in the example of marriage, if you are seeking marriage to just say that you're married, to just have a certain title or a position within your life, within your community, then also understand that now you have misplaced your intentions. Your intentions, they're not for the sake of Allah, right? You're doing something that is related to this dunya, and while it's halal, you are not thinking of, okay, what am I gonna do to ensure that Allah is pleased with me when I am married? How am I gonna show up as a wife or as a husband, as a mother, as a father, right? whatever, like whatever your role would be. How would I show up as a daughter-in-law, as a son-in-law? How would I show up as a daughter? How would I show up as a neighbor? How am I going to ensure that I am ready for these responsibilities and that Allah is in the center? That even when Allah gives me what I've been asking for, I don't lose the sight of what matters. I don't lose the sight of what's important the most, and that is worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Keeping Allah in the center. Making sure that whatever it is that you are seeking, that when Allah gives it to you, that is at the core of what you do before anything else. So within your marriage, if you were to get married and you get married and Allah gives you someone that you ask for, that itself is your test as well. Now Allah's gonna give you what you ask for. How are you gonna deal with it, right? Are you gonna attribute the good within that marriage back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Hold yourself accountable when you have your own shortcomings, right? When you fall short. Are you going to be forgiving? We're not talking about the cases of abuse here. We're talking about like disagreements, miscommunication, right? Are you going to be forgiving? Are you going to be gentle and compassionate and understanding for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Are you gonna be are you going to continue showing care and empathy and love even when you're upset with the individual, right? Even when you're upset with your spouse? Are you going to do that for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where you understand that Allah has blessed me with this, and while you may be upset today, it's still a blessing that Allah gave you, right? You still have a lot of other good things within your life. So are you going to continue being grateful? Are you going to neglect how you show up for Allah because now Allah has given you someone? What I see sometimes with sisters is that they get married and then they start to neglect their prayer. Or they become a parent and they say, I have a really hard time being a parent. I have a really hard time prioritizing my prayer. And that itself is your test as well, right? Allah has promised us that we will be tested through whatever the means, whatever the blessings are. Like you will be tested through money, through your spouse, through your children. People are tested through what's important to them. And the more value you put on something, the harder that test is going to feel. And so you want to make sure that you succeed in this dunya, and that your sincerity, your intentions are sincere, and they don't become the reason that you go astray, right? So from the get-go, always purify your intentions. And so for this, by the end of this video, I just hope that you take one thing away from this video, if there's anything, and that is that your sincerity, your intentions matter, and you want to check in with yourself. Do it daily if possible. At the end of the day, just ask yourself, what intentions did I have today? If there were anything good that you did, okay? You attended a halaqah. What was the reason that you went there? You decided to hold a halaqah, or you decided to invite guests over. You decided to check on someone who was sick, okay? You decided to help someone who needed assistance. Is it because you wanted them to think that you're good, or did you think to yourself, you know, I'm busy, but I know that this is something that I'm gonna do it for the sake of Allah. I know that Allah is watching me. I know that what I would do for His sake is not in vain. And so when we start to dig within ourselves for the reasons that we are doing things, we not only find liberation from false attachments, but we also discover our true self. And we're able to remove these layers that cloud our judgment, that cloud our intentions, that distance us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that make it difficult for us to develop a relationship with Allah. So now imagine if you are able to sit there and dive deep into why you do the things that you do day to day, and you're able to purify those intentions, seek forgiveness for anything that you did that didn't align, that wasn't sincerely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then what do you think that would do to your relationship with Allah? Of course, it's gonna bring you closer to Allah, because you are humbling yourself in front of Allah. You are acknowledging that you can fall short. But the other thing that just came to mind is the fact that the one thing that prevented Iblis from earning the forgiveness of Allah is that he never sought forgiveness, and he was too arrogant and too proud. And we don't want to fall into the same trap. We don't want to do what he did. And so when you realize that you fell short, when you realize that your intentions were not sincere, repent, ask Allah for forgiveness, and ask him to make it easy for you to keep your intentions pure. So that's it for today. I hope you found this helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Assalamu.